Welcome into the Reseller Island podcast, members only section. This is the first of what I expect to be bi-monthly BOLO videos we plan on putting out. These videos will either cover items or niches of items that you guys should be on the lookout for, some tips on the reselling, or this one is going to be more of like an educational video, a bit of a BOLO video, but also how to describe items, how to identify items. And this one is going to pertain to the evolution of early photography. If you've watched the podcast a little bit, the great thing about the Reseller Island is that we all sort of specialize in different niches, right? J-Ride does a lot with electronics. Shane over Soda City Flips does a lot with books. I do a lot with vintage sports memorabilia, but also general antiques. And when I first started getting into sports memorabilia, one of the areas that I really focused on was early sports photography. And that led to general knowledge on photography and dealing with antique photography in general as well. So I'm going to take you through the early stages of photography. The first photographic process was invented in 1839 by Louis Daguerre, a French inventor. And that style of photo was known as a daguerreotype. I'm going to show you a daguerreotype right here, and I'll pop it up on my screen in a moment. But here's a daguerreotype. So often you'll find these photos in gutta percha cases. Let me pop up my extra camera right now. So gutta percha was an early type of rubber. You see that used for early golf balls, but in this case, early photographic cases. So very lovely young woman here on this daguerreotype. Daguerreotypes were a type of photo developed on a copper plate, so a piece of copper. And it is challenging to distinguish the daguerreotype from the next type of photo that came out, but I'll tell you how to do that in a second. So you describe a daguerreotype generally by its size. This one I would call a 1/16 plate based on the measurements. You can find those listings online pretty readily. The largest will be a full plate, which I think is about 6.5 by 8.5. So the main way you want to distinguish a daguerreotype, and I will do this, I will show you by a pop-up photo here, but when you turn the daguerreotype at an angle, the whole background around the person, the lady in this case, will be reflective. So this space around her will all be very reflective and mirror-like. That won't be the case in the next type of photo that I'll show you. So early daguerreotypes always have value, even if they're just generic portraits. Obviously, the more interesting the content, the better. If it's not a portrait, if it's a sports daguerreotypes, baseball daguerreotypes, exceedingly rare, exceedingly valuable. But generally, like occupational ones are going to be more valuable. And really, to be honest, the attractiveness of the person being photographed, or the wardrobe, if they have interesting clothing on or carrying an interesting purse, that's going to add value to it. I would say on average, just your run-of-the-mill daguerreotype, $30 to $40 probably. This one, I would say $75 to $80, just because it is a pretty attractive lady, and that helps to add some value, just the aesthetics of the image. So again, daguerreotype, invented in 1839, came to America early 1840s, and was a predominant, or the only form of photography for the decade of the 1850s. The next type of photograph that was developed was the ambrotype. Ambrotypes were invented in 1854. They look very similar to a daguerreotype. They're often housed in the identical gutta percha frames. I'll show you an ambrotype right now. This is a bi-framed ambrotype. I will show you on my close-up here in a second. The difference between a daguerreotype and an ambrotype, unlike the daguerreotype, which was on copper, ambrotypes were on glass. So let me bring up the camera here, and I'll show you a couple ambrotypes. So again, this is a larger format, double-framed, pretty cool ambrotype. So it looks like you have two Civil War soldiers, maybe brothers, and maybe their spouses are posing on the opposite one. Beautiful double ambrotype. Again, the main way you would tell an ambrotype from a daguerreotype the background will not be reflective. The image itself will have a little bit of reflectivity, the portrait of the person. And I'll show you why that is in a second. If you have difficulty, you can very carefully remove this whole piece from the case, and you'll see when you take it apart, you'll see it's glass, not copper. But sometimes it's harder to get them back in. So if you don't have to do that, I would avoid that. So this is a larger style ambrotype. This one is a smaller ambrotype. You can see in comparison to the daguerreotype, these are almost identical looking, right? But you can see that little reflectivity around the lady above. The guy below does not have that reflectivity. Here's an ambrotype that is not in a frame at all. You can see it's just a piece of glass. Generally, it has a ghostly appearance. You can see the image of the portrait, it has like a reflectivity here, but around it there's nothing. And generally they would put a piece of dark paper behind it. So this is an unframed ambrotype. You don't see them too often. Not that it has more value. This one just probably lost its case. Ambrotypes were the predominant photograph through the mid 1850s until 1856 when tintypes were invented. And most people are familiar with the term tintype. People think that as the antique type of photography. And this is a tintype right here. I will show you in my view box. But they call it a tintype. It's actually a very thin piece of iron, not tin. Tintypes, you often find them loose like this one. Sometimes they are in cases. But let me give you a look at this one. So this is a larger plate tintype. This is actually one from my collection because this is a Frankfurt, which is a section of Philadelphia, Frankfurt Athletic Association. You can see them holding a pennant. They're holding like some sort of horn there. So when you have tintypes, that's what you want to see in terms of value. When it has something other than just a portrait of a person. When you have musical instruments, sports tintypes have good value. Baseball tintypes are not super uncommon, but still valuable. Football tintypes, because football didn't start until the 1860s, very rare, very desirable. So again, this one's a cool one because it is an athletic association. Tintypes are relatively common. I mean, you'll see tintypes at flea markets, still desirable, but especially desirable if they have something interesting about them. That's where they really can command very good value. So tintypes were invented in 1856. Around the same time, though, in France, carte de vistes were invented, or CDVs were invented in France as the first type of paper photography. It was an albumin paper they printed on, and it was a huge advancement in photography because before that, basically you would make one image per plate. Like you were developing the image on the copper or on the tin, iron in this case. But CDVs, when they came to market, they can make multiple photos from the same image they took. So here's an example of a pair of CDVs. Like I said, these were invented in Paris in 1854. But they didn't come to America until the late 1850s, around 1859. So again, here's a pair of CDVs. Similar to tintypes or the other photos, the more interesting the image, the more value. But here we have two gentlemen. Sometimes you'll have a CDV where it lists the photographer and the city of that photographer on the bottom. Other times it's on back. The other interesting thing about CDVs, from 1864 to 1866, you would have to pay a tax to have these photographs made. So this has a stamp, a tax stamp on it. We know this one dates 1864 to 1866. Little GW on that stamp there. And this one, let's see, it's North Bridgewater, Massachusetts is a photographer information. This one, we have Taunton, Massachusetts. So, and these are not super uncommon. They were used for a wide period of time, but for the first time, people could buy photographs as a souvenir. So you do see CDVs of Abraham Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln, of Ulysses S. Grant, of all the Civil War generals and the major people during that time frame. So this was something that really changed photography significantly that people could, collect these and buy these, and you sometimes will find these in albums, either family members or, images of the Civil War, images of Civil War generals, etc. So all CDVs are the same size, measuring about 2.5 by 4 inches. And again, the value is really going to come in the image itself, the interest of the image, the predominant photo during the early 1860s, especially during the Civil War. The next type of photograph, which came in the late 1860s, were cabinet photos, cabinet photography. Generally speaking, cabinet photos are albumin paper photos mounted to a cardboard backing, which is not that asimilar from CDVs. CDVs are paper photographs mounted on backing, but that's a particular size, the CDV. Cabinet photos are a wide range of sizes, and I'll show you some different sizes here shortly. A particular type of cabinet photo, the cabinet card, is the one most people associate with cabinet photos. So a cabinet card is a very specific size. This is a cabinet card right here, and I'll show you a close-up of these shortly. About 4.25 inches by 6.5 inches. So that's the standard size of a cabinet card. These were widely used, late 1860s, after the turn of the century. They weren't super common in post 1900. I would say once you get past the teens, you don't really see them anymore. But until that point, they were widely used for, was that 50 years or so. This was the predominant type of photograph taken. So here's a group of cabinet photos. The first one here, this is an early 1870s a pair of baseball players. Look at those guys decked out in some pretty fancy looking plaid pants and striped socks, early baseball cleats with their baseball bats. This is actually identified as a pair of Iowa players. They're from Marshalltown, Iowa. These guys are actually probably teammates of Cap Anson, one of the biggest names in early baseball. He also played in Marshalltown, Iowa. So this is an early 1870s baseball image. We get into this cabinet. This is a Yale College rowing team posing with trophies, posing with flags. See, this one has New Haven, Connecticut. Sometimes they'll have the photographer mark on the outside, on the front side of the cabinet. Others have it on the back side of the cabinet. This one actually has it on both. Cowles, New Haven, Connecticut. And then there were cabinet cards made that of, more famous people. So here we have an actress, Bessie Clayton. This was a cabinet card put out by Newsboy Tobacco. So an actress cabinet card here, and mid-dance, mid-ballerina. This one has some fading, so it doesn't show up as well on my camera, but it is a little better looking in person. So these are cabinet cards, 4.25 by 6.5 inches. The value is really going to come in the image itself. Is it an athletic team? Is it an actress? Is it a early automobile or something workforce related? A industrial, something like that. That's where the value is going to come in on the uniqueness to the photograph. But they generally have a little value, even if they're portraits. I mean, people do buy them. Those type of cabinet cards are often found in albums like this one. This is a very cool Victorian fabric covered album that has the Liberty Bell on front with a mirror there. You can see this one would have cabinet cards in there. It also would have had CDVs in the back. This one doesn't have any images in there. So this one's a standing one that would be a tabletop, but you'll often find photo albums at flea markets, either smaller ones holding just CDVs or the larger types holding cabinet cards. Do have some value, especially if they have photos in them. This one doesn't, but still, if somebody will like that, that's going to go to my antique shop. Just picked that up recently at a flea market. So cabinet cards are a type of cabinet photo, but a very specific size cabinet photo. But cabinet photos came in all sizes, again, starting in the late 1860s through, I'd say, the 30s. They were made. So I'll show you a few. This is a 1910s football team cabinet photo. I have a lot of sports cabinet photography. One of the things I love to buy and sell and research. So there's one, see, more of a standard size, probably 11 by 13. Here we have a panoramic size cabinet. It was a 1920s professional football team, actually from my town that I live in. And then you would describe these photos by the size. You can look it up online. There's, the cabinet card size. You have there's panel photos, boudoir photos, which all refer to different sizes. Then you get into some of the mammoth plates, and this will be a mammoth plate here. It's gonna be hard to show this guy; it's so big. But we have a massive cabinet photo of an early flying machine. This is called an ornithopter. Contemporary to the Wright brothers. This probably was not a very successful aircraft. You can see it has like wings, and the guy is on the ornithopter there. So that is in my inventory, but one of my favorite pieces in my inventory. Thought about keeping that, but I don't collect flying machine items. I figured in case somebody wants to come along and snag that. So again, cabinet photos come in all sizes, and really the snapshot photo, which came out in the late 1890s, changed photography a lot. People could take their own photographs. So in the turn of the century, 1900, 1910, 1920, you can find a lot of photo albums that are nothing but snapshots. So personally taken photos. Prior to that, all of these photos would have been taken by photographer studios. So that really changed photography a lot. That people could, use their own camera, make their own photo albums. They didn't have to rely on a photo studio to do that. So that changed photography significantly going into the 20th century. So that takes you a little bit through the evolution in case you see this stuff out at yard sales or flea markets. Again, daguerreotypes always going to have some value. If you see them, and you can see that reflection there, that silver reflection, that it's a daguerreotype, the first type of photo ever taken. So definitely worth picking up if cheap, because there is a value in them. But thank you for watching. Thank you for being a member. Keep an eye out for these videos. They're going to come out a couple times a month. We're going to alternate, I believe, and we'll each put out some. And then stay tuned for our regular podcast episodes every Monday morning. They should be coming out. And I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.